Welcome to the Send Talk podcast. It's where we get straight to the point to answer the most common questions we get asked here at SENDIASS Manchester. And joining me is Laura Nardella, an advisor at SENDIASS Manchester.
Thanks, Vic. Hi, I'm Laura. And just to let you know, for more information about everything that we're going to be talking about in this episode, simply head to our website, sendiassmanchester.org.
So, Laura, what are we talking about in this episode?
So, Vic, today we're going to answer the question, how do I change my child's school place? And we're going to cover two situations, what to do to change schools with an EHC plan and what to do if your child doesn't have a plan.
Because I imagine they are two different procedures.
Yes, that's right. So there's two admissions processes. If you've got a plan and you don't have an EHC plan, there's two admissions lanes, as you were. So this is how I'm thinking we're going to break down the episode. So when you're listening, you can jump right to the section that you need, because if your child is in one situation, you won't need to know the other. So what we'll do is we'll start with what to do without an EHC plan, and that'll be brief because it's a bit more straightforward. In between, I'll include what to do if your child is actually going through an EHC needs assessment. So that is what to do essentially if your child is on the cusp, or you think they're on the cusp of getting a plan, because sometimes there's a bit of confusion around that. And finally, then we'll move on to what to do if your child does have an EHC plan, which will be the bulk of the episode.
What we won't be going through, though, is how to appeal a school named in an EHC plan to the tribunal, even though it's technically part of changing a school. And that's because it's a big old topic. There's lots of information, and handily, there is a whole other podcast episode available on that subject, which you can find on the Send Talk feed that you're listening to the podcast on now, or head to the SENDIASS website. So don't worry if you're not sure about your situation. Stay with us both, and we should be able to make things clearer for you as we go along.
That's right. How to change a school without an EHC plan.
So this must be for children who are on SEN support, or rather for any child.
That's right. That's for any child in Manchester, technically, on roll at a school in Manchester, in primary or secondary school. So the admissions team arranges the school places in this situation. And obviously, if they don't have an EHC plan, we're only talking about mainstream school places here.
So where do you start?
Go to the Manchester School Admissions page. We'll attach a link, but essentially, if you just do an internet search, Manchester School Admissions, it will pop up. There are various buttons. They're called buttons, but you know what I mean. It's on the page, and you can choose what you want to do. And the first thing you'll need to do is decide whether it's a place at primary or a secondary school. So choose what's right for you. Once you do that, the next page you want to click on Get a Place Now for any year group. So that will be for pupils who are on roll at a school now, and you might be in the middle of a school year and you want to change to a different school. Read the information available on the page, because there's so much information about how school places are decided, which is really informative, and I know parents really want to know how they're making those decisions. When you're ready to apply, so you want to move forward with that, just click on Apply for a School Place. This will take you to another page, and then you've got the form where you can download.
And that form is form V6.
Yes.
We won't link the form, as it's important to get the latest version of the form direct from Manchester Admissions, but we will just link in the show notes to that general admissions page where you can follow those steps.
Right, yeah, so we don't want out-of-date information. So the V6 form, I'm going to go through it really, really quickly here, just so that you know. To summarise quickly, it's really short. It's got 4 sections. Section A is your child's details. Section B is the school or academy details that are your choices. So what you want your child to be attending. And you've got the choice to choose at least 3, and I would recommend give some choices to the local authority. Section 3 is parents' details, and Section D is the section to be filled in by the staff or the head teacher or acting head of the current school where your child's attending now. So when you look at the form, you will see there's some tick boxes. Not all of them will be relevant to you, but what will be relevant to you is that what we're talking now is all the children will have some special educational need. And this is the section where the SEN and the support required to assistant education is identified. So there will be a box tick around that. And it will be the opportunity for the current school to provide that information. Just to let you know, if you are a new arrival to Manchester, perhaps you don't have any school place at all, you never had a school place, you don't need to fill in Section D.
Can I ask a stupid question? How does the current school fill in Section D?
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. So what you have to do is you'll have to have a conversation with the fact that you are wanting to change the school place, and you provide the form to them and then ask them to fill it in. I would say have a conversation with them so they know what's going on, and you may have to chase that up.
Brill. I'm assuming, one shouldn't assume, but I'm assuming there's advice on that page to help parents
Yeah,
too.
a Manchester Help and Support page about admissions. There's loads of information on there. So where you download the form, or actually I think it's the page before, you can download the notes to help you fill in the form. So that's going to give you loads more information than I've already given you now. And it also tells you where to send it. It tells you the process of what will happen next, including how Manchester processes waiting lists, which is quite interesting. I won't go through it now, but they do have a waiting list system, but it's just for a term. It explains everything there. It's got everything that you need.
Sounds pretty straightforward so far. Any more tips?
Just one last thing, because we're talking about children with SEN, and that includes disabilities, medical needs. There is something called a Category 2 request, and this is for situations where a child has a medical or social need that's quite significant. I would say this is a high level, and for this reason, they need a very particular school. These are kind of rarer occasions. You will need a letter from your doctor or your social worker to back up this request. But there is a page on Manchester Help and Support all about this. We'll link that in the show notes. So if you think this applies to you, you can have a read of it and take it from there.
So what about if your child, now this is slightly different, what if your child is going through an EHC needs assessment? So they've not got one, but they're going through it.
So they've not got a plan. So they're not in the other camp, but they are... but they're going through an EHC needs assessment. So you're thinking, what do I do? How do I proceed? I may want to change school place. There's two little bits of advice here. The first one is, until the local authority agree to issue a plan, you always have to assume that you're in this first section. Your child does not have a plan. However, if they have or on the verge of agreeing to issue a plan, I would say you don't need to go through that other process, because when you get your draft EHC plan, the local authority will ask you what school is your preference. And at that point, it's almost like you can ask for your change of school at that point. So I don't know if that was a bit confusing, but basically, if you're just about to get a plan, at that point at the draft plan, you can request the school that you want. So just hold on for that. But if you're right at the beginning and you're not really sure what's going to happen, just assume that you fall within the category of not having a plan.
Straightforward advice, Laura.
Oh, okay.
You're very good at this. Yeah, it's very good advice.
I've confused myself.
Let's draw a line under this section then. So that section was for your child if they don't have an EHC plan, and also if they're going through the process of going through an EHC plan. So
that's right.
So far, so good. Pretty straightforward. Let's change the journey a little bit now, and let's talk about changing school when your child has an EHC plan. I don't want to tempt fate, but I feel this is going to be a little bit more of a process.
A little bit, maybe slightly. There's more options, more circumstances, there's relevant law, and there's just more to consider overall. So we'll try and guide you through that.
But in our typical Send Talk style, we're going to do it in a way that's easy to understand, hopefully not a load of information smashed in your face. So where do we start, Laura?
Okay, so as we said before, this is for parents whose child is attending a school with a plan. And for whatever reason, you want to change that school. As per EHCP procedure, the current school where your child's attending will be named in Section I of the EHC plan. So to change the school, you have to change the EHC plan. Now, there are certain ways to request changes to the plan, and that's what we're going to go through. So bear in mind that once you have an EHC plan, it isn't admissions who allocate the schools. It's always going to be the EHCP team. So that's what your focus is.
And that's a key difference to the previous stage. So one of the ways to change the plan is through the tribunal appeal, but we are not going to be covering that. But we do have a helpful podcast episode all about that, don't we?
That's correct. So you can only lodge a tribunal appeal if the EHC plan is dated within 2 months. And that's a really short appeal window. And I'd say most of the people who contact SENDIASS about this issue about changing schools find that their plans fall well outside of that timescale. Some plans may not have been changed for a year or two or maybe more. And then they ask us, what can we do? We can't appeal to the tribunal, so we're stuck. And that's kind of what we're going to be focusing on today. But like you said, Vic, we have got the option of going to tribunal, but it's always worth checking the date on your child's plan. And if you are within the 2-month appeal window and you want to appeal, I advise you to go straight to our podcast episode on Part I appeals, which explains everything about appealing to the tribunal. If you're still kind of not sure about those dates, call SENDIASS and we'll be able to advise you on that.
And that episode is available on the Send Talk podcast feed where you're listening to this podcast now, or simply search Send Talk on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or on the SENDIASS website. Got a nice little plug in that, Laura. So what's the next step, Laura?
So we talked about having an EHC plan and you want to make a change to the EHC plan, but not through the tribunal. So how do you do that? Requesting changes to the current EHC plan is done through the annual review process, which I know all of the parents will be familiar with. So this is your situation. What is your next step? So you can either wait until your next annual review meeting. So if you've got one coming up or it's coming up quite soon, you can bring up the fact that you want a change of school at that review meeting and have that discussion at that point. The second thing you can do, if your review is not due for a while and you do want to bring it up, you can always ask the school SENCO for an early review meeting.
I'm going to be obvious for a second, Laura.
Yeah.
But the annual review happens every 12 months.
Yeah. No, it's a good thing to bring up because sometimes you do find that the parents say, oh, wait, I haven't had a review meeting for 18 months. So it's always a good thing to remind parents so they can go back to the schools and just keep those dates in their diaries and sort of find out what's happening when. By law, the plan must be reviewed every 12 months. It's the school SENCO or the SEND team which arrange the review meetings with parents. However, if you think about it, sometimes you have an annual review meeting and the plan isn't necessarily amended in any way. And that's why you can end up with a plan that might be dated from 2 years ago because there was no need to amend. There was no need to put a new date on it. And so that's why parents have plans that are kind of, they're well not within the appeal window.
How would you prepare for an annual review where you're going to ask for a change of school?
Well, annual review meetings are quite informal. Everyone listening will have gone to them, I'm sure. But I would suggest it's really helpful to prepare beforehand and write down what it is that you want, not just to sort of bring it up and say, I'm not, this school isn't right for my child, I want a different school. So a couple of things to write down. The reasons you want to change the school, they just can be bullet points. You don't have to write an essay. And you should also have an idea of what school or at least what type of school you want to move to. The benefit of doing that is that you don't forget any points. You can bring everything up at the meeting and you can make sure that what you want is actually captured on the annual review paperwork. So this is what the SENCO will send to the EHCP team around 2 weeks after the review meeting. Sometimes parents can write their information up and hand it to the SENCO and make sure that that goes off with the documents, or you can just make sure that the SENCO writes it down and captures that in the information.
You've probably heard loads of reasons for wanting to change schools. What sort of reasons are there?
Well, I mean, there are so many. I mean, one of the really, really basic ones is a parent moves to a completely different part of Manchester, and Manchester's so tall and thin that, it can be really, really far away. But I would say by far the most common reason that we come across at SENDIASS is when a child is in a mainstream school and the parents want to change to a specialist school. Sometimes the parents had always asked for that specialist school, even when the child received their first EHC plan. And then they were told after the school consultations there weren't any places, and then the mainstream school was named. Sometimes the parents wanted the mainstream and then it's not really working and then they want to change to specialist. But one of the things I just want to bring up here is that this is also really common. When the parents had asked for specialist and they were told there weren't any places, quite often we found that the parents were led to understand that their child had a place on the waiting list. And this sometimes have gone on for a couple of years or more than that. So basically what I'm saying is that the parents thought, okay, there's no room now. My child's on a waiting list. I'll stay at the mainstream school. It will happen when a place becomes available. My child will get a place. And then that never happened.
That sounds like a really disappointing process.
It is, because I think there is that kind of expectation. Well, my child was on a waiting list and why haven't I got a school place? It's been 4 years now. So what I'm going to say here is technically there are no waiting lists for specialist schools. Now, I'm using air quotes on waiting lists. I would say the local authority are aware of the pupils that either prefer specialist or require specialist schools. They are aware of that. That is a fact. But SENDIASS would always advise parents to understand that there are no guarantees. The only guarantee is this: the school named in Part I of the finalised EHC plan has a legal duty to admit that child. So that is enforceable under Section 43 of the Children and Families Act. Anything else, whatever the EHCP team or a school has told you or someone else has told you, anything else is not guaranteed if it's not written in the plan.
So if your child's plan states a mainstream school, but you thought you were on a waiting list for a specialist, all you can assume then is that your child has a place in the mainstream school.
Yeah, that's basically it. All you can assume is in what's Part I. So here's another example that sometimes pops up. If your child's plan states in Part I they're at XYZ mainstream school, it might also, sometimes it says in Part I, awaiting a move to specialist. Even then, there is still no guarantee when that move will happen. That move could happen tomorrow or it could happen in 5 years' time. The only circumstance when you can be sure is when Part I states the school that they're going to be moving to and a date. So I'll give you an example. So if it says in Part I that, okay, I'm at Vic's mainstream school, but then underneath it, it might say transferring to ABC specialist school in September 2025. At that point, yes, because it's written in Part I, you can be sure that that move is going to happen.
That's good to know. I feel like we've covered a lot of context. So it's good to know, though. It's really good to know. And also covering stuff in detail like this makes our parents that are listening feel like they're not alone.
Yeah, I agree. And because a lot of times there is that confusion when they come to SENDIASS and they say, but wait, they know that we want this school. They said we're on the waiting list and you thought you were in one process and then suddenly you feel like at your start, you're at a different part of the process. So it's really good to get that information out so parents understand what it actually means and what they can do to move things forward.
So let's recap then. My child has an EHC plan. The plan is out of date to appeal, so no tribunal. I've requested an annual review meeting where I'll request to change the name school. Have I forgot anything?
No, I think I've forgotten something. So just want to say, when I was saying preparing for the annual review meeting, I'd advise you to research the schools before the meeting. So if you're asking for a specialist school, look at their websites, see the curriculum, what education levels they cover, what is their offer, see if they're suitable. I'd say most of this information is available from their website, so you can try and give them a call as well and see if you can have a 10-minute conversation with them. But it's always best to make an informed decision because you don't want to ask for a school that then when the consultation comes back, it's an unsuitable school. So I just want to sort of avoid any unnecessary delays.
Can parents ask for any types of school?
There are different rules for different types of schools. So the main rule of thumb, according to law, is a parent can name any preference if it falls under the categories listed in, so go back to Children and Families Act again, and this is listed in section 38(3) of Children and Families Act. There's quite a few different sections there, but basically they're maintained schools, mainstream or specialist, or academies, mainstream or specialists. And there's other different categories there as well. If you ask for one of these settings to be named in an EHC plan, your local authority has to consider your request and can only refuse if certain reasons apply. I feel like that's going to be then going into a different kind of area. So I would say for more information on choosing a school, SENDIASS have a choosing a school fact sheet, which is really handy. I'll go into it in all kinds of detail and we will link that in the show notes. And I just wanted to say that if you are requesting an independent school, there are different rules about independent schools. The fact sheet does cover that, but you could always have a conversation with SENDIASS, your SENDIASS advisor about that as well.
Right, so I've gone to the annual review meeting, requested the change of school. The review paperwork is sent to the EHCP team. Now what happens, Laura?
It's almost like you formally said, I want to change schools. And that's how you do it when the EHC plan process. So the next step is the EHCP team will consult with your preferred schools to see if they, 1, can meet need based on what's written in the plan, and 2, can they offer a place. That's kind of what goes into a consultation, a school consultation, essentially. So during this process, the EHCP team will also consult with other schools that they find suitable. So it's not just your choices that they are consulting with. They're allowed to. I'm not saying that they're going to, but that is allowed because parents do come back to us and say, why have they consulted that school? That wasn't my choice. The local authority has got the right to do that. Whilst all this is happening, so sending off consultations, waiting for consultations to come back from schools, etc. I would always advise parents stay in touch by email with the EHCP coordinator linked to your child's school. They're going to be the ones that are doing it, and you can find out their name and email either from the school SENCO or come to SENDIASS and we'll signpost you to the right coordinator.
So you're saying keep up to date with what's happening. What sort of stuff are we asking for updates on?
I'd say the main thing is ask the EHCP team coordinator to share with you updates on the schools consulted. So you may say something like, I want a list of all the schools consulted. What are their responses? When was it sent? Have these schools responded yet? So you kind of want to know what the lie of the land is of what's going on there. And you also want to, I'd always say to parents, ask for a copy of the school consultation response. So that's what the school is responding back to the local authority. You can ask for a copy. You've got a right to ask for a copy because it's information that contains details about your child. And the next step after that will be that when all the consultations are back or they're back, the EHCP team will essentially make a decision on what school to name depending on what the schools came back with.
So then there'll be a decision on the school and you might just get the school that you want.
That's right. And if you do, that's great. But don't forget to ensure that you get that finalised EHC plan with the school named in section I because of what we said before about the law surrounding the duty to admit. There could, Vic, also be the situation that you didn't get the school that you want. The EHC team may name a different school. They may well have renamed the current school that your child is attending, the one that you wanted to leave. That could happen. And that may make you feel like this whole exercise was a bit of a waste of time, but it isn't, because at the end of this process, if you do find yourself in that situation, you will find that this opens up your right of appeal to the SEND tribunal.
And that's something parents didn't have before because the plans weren't within the 2 months. So how come they have access to that now?
So let's just focus on two things that can happen after an annual review meeting takes place. I mean, there's more things that can happen, but we're just going to focus on two.
Mm-hmm.
I've been saying two for everything, haven't I?
It's a good way to break it down.
Right, number one, your annual review meeting takes place. You ask for amendments. What can happen? The EHCP team makes amendments to the plan, and the end result is that you eventually get an amended plan, and this will have a new date. So you may not have the school that you want on that plan, but it's a new plan, and that plan will be dated when it's issued. So you've got an up-to-date plan. Okay. And if you disagree with the school named on that plan, then you can go ahead and lodge an appeal to the SEND tribunal. The second thing that can happen after an annual review is, so we'll go back a couple of steps. We're at the review meeting. We've requested amendments to the plan, but the EHCP team can refuse to amend. That is also within their rights. That's an option for them. So they can say, no, we're not. We've decided that there's no need to amend. We're not going to amend.
So what do you do if they refuse to amend?
So don't worry. We'll still get your right of appeal through a different way. If the EHC team refuse to amend your plan, then you ask them for a letter confirming their decision. So within the 4 weeks after the review meeting, they should technically have made that decision, and you can say, right, are you amending? Are you not amending? If you're not amending, I want the official letter saying the local authority refused to amend. Why would you care about this letter, and why is it significant? Because it's this letter stating they refuse to amend, which also triggers your right of appeal to the tribunal. So when you have that letter, keep it, because that's what you'll use to lodge your tribunal appeal.
Right, so let me get this straight in my head and
Okay.
for our listener.
Yeah.
You go to the annual review, ask for amendments, and they either, 1, amend the plan and name the school you want, which is good. 2, amend and don't name the school you want, in which case you can appeal to the tribunal with the newly dated plan. Or number 3, they refuse to amend, in which case you can appeal to the tribunal using the refuse to amend letter. I think that's it. You cracked it.
You summed it up absolutely brilliantly. That's amazing. Yes, that's absolutely perfect. So I'm hoping that feels really clear for everyone. So going through the annual review process is a way to request changes to the plan, including the school place. And at the end of the process, if you don't get what you want, at least you'll be in a position to appeal to the SEND tribunal, which you didn't have before.
This feels like a natural ending to this episode, but
Yep.
in typical Laura style, I think you've got loads more advice up your sleeve, haven't you?
Yes, some advice could be managing expectations. I just want to make a little bit of a point about a length of time. This process isn't a quick fix, but sometimes it can just take ages to get an amended plan after an annual review. So that part is the kind of the sticking point, the bit where things can go wrong. Parents will know that you might have had an annual review meeting, you've requested amendments, and then you can be left waiting months and months, and there's no amended plan, but the local authority haven't refused to amend. So you can be stuck in this limbo, and it leaves you in the same place as before, no change of school, no right of appeal. Okay, that's really common. So what do you do? This is my last tip. There is case law which does give timescales to the local authority on how long they should take to amend a plan following an annual review. So that's precisely the situation that we're finding ourselves in now. So what is this timescale? It says that the plan should be amended and finalised within 12 weeks of the annual review meeting. So we're talking 3 months. There is a bit more information about those timescales. We're going to add a link in the show notes to a page on the EHC website. Now, EHC has a fantastic website, which is all of information about SEN, SEN law, and all that kind of stuff. And they're absolutely brilliant. This page details this particular case law and the timescales, just in case you want to go into that in a bit more detail. So you're waiting your plan to be amended. You feel like the process is going on a bit too long. You're not sure what's going on. email the HCP team, remind them of these timescales, and this may help to get you back on track. And just as the last bit, similarly, appealing to the SEND tribunal is not a quick fix either. You can be waiting for months for an appeal hearing, and there's not much to do there. That's just how the system is at the moment. But all I can say is if you do lodge your appeal, your hearing will eventually happen.
So this episode has really, really helpfully informed parents, our listener, to understanding the overall process and the initial steps that they can take to start requesting a change of school. After that, if they need any more advice, they can contact SENDIASS.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. Do contact SENDIASS Manchester if you need further information or advice on this process or on your specific situation. The absolute easiest way to contact us is through our website, sendiassmanchester.org. We have a contact form which we will respond to within 24 hours within a working week. And being on our website will mean you'll be able to have a look at all our fact sheets, like the Choosing a School fact sheet. You can listen to other podcast episodes and just access all the information and resources we have on there. But you can always contact us as well by email or on the helpline.
A brilliant resource. And just to clarify, to access SENDIASS Manchester, you must be a Manchester City Council resident. But there is a SENDIASS in every local authority in England, and you can find yours by doing a quick internet search of SENDIASS plus your local authority name.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Vic.
Thanks, Laura. So that is that for this episode. Thank you so much for listening.
Do you have a question for us that you'd like us to answer on future episodes of the SEND Talk podcast? We'd really love to hear from you. So send your question along with your name to the Manchester SENDIASS email, which is sendiass@manchester.gov.uk. And we've included all that information in the show notes, of course.
Thank you very much. See ya.
Bye.